This is Dateline News and Conversation. Tonight, we're live from Ireland with my friend Mathew Lawlor. Mathew, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Regis. Thank you.
Well, I've been reading really very little, but what I do know is your government in Ireland, if I'm not
Uh-huh.
mistaken, have recognized Palestinian statehood.
Yes.
And I have seen some videos and photographs of massive demonstrations in
hmm
favor of Palestine. Mathew, tell me what's going on in Ireland.
Well, I mean, there's obviously what's going on in Palestine is something that's happening in Palestine. I can't speak with any authority about that, but I can certainly speak about Ireland. And there is a lot of support for Palestine, simply, I think, largely because of our colonial past here in Ireland. We are historically sympathetic to the underdog because of that, because we historically been for at least 800 years and perhaps more, we've been specifically that underdog. And so there's a natural predisposition amongst Irish people to support anyone who's the underdog. That being said, what is unusual is that this Irish government, the same one that has come out in support of Palestine, is also has been rather interested in fetishizing over laws like hate speech laws to protect people from saying anything that's going to hurt anybody's feelings. And particularly, one of the facets of the hate speech law was that Holocaust denial, anti-Semitism, etc., was one of the main facets of it. So I just think it's interesting that the same government who were radicalizing their own administration about hate speech laws to curate all thought and all language are now suddenly opening the gateways for to look at Palestine.
So, Mathew, what's been the reaction of the Irish people in terms of the hate speech laws? I can't imagine that Irish people are going to want to be silenced, suppressed. And what are the Irish people doing in terms of supporting the Palestinian issue?
Well, firstly, in relation to hate speech laws, you're absolutely right. If there's one country that freedom for whom freedom of speech and freedom of thought is at the very core of our essence, it's Ireland. And we box way beyond our weight. I mean, we're known all over the world for talking and being loquacious and joking and music. So the idea of attempting to curate that is, I have the feeling that didn't come from an Irish brain. That came from somebody else. Do the Irish people want it? No, they don't. And they've declared that I think 80% of the people don't know even why they're thinking about it. But there seems to be an administrative regime in Ireland that either live in an echo chamber where they believe that their own views represent the views of everybody else in this country, or they simply are quite happy to carry on in a malevolent way and an abusive way to gaslight people into doing what nobody wants. So this has been, we had a referendum recently in this country in relation to family. And family is at the very core of what Irish people have been known for. When family and our great hospitality, I think it's our defining national trait is our hospitality. James Joyce said that. That's not just my opinion. And it's our great virtue. We have lots of vices, but one of our virtues is our hospitality, overwhelming hospitality. And the idea of telling Irish people that they can't express themselves, and it's this is the mechanism of an abusive gaslighting administration, or possibly one who's entirely disconnected from what everybody else wants to wants to what the life that everybody else in Ireland wants to live. And to address the Palestinian issue, as I said, I've never been there. I don't know. I don't think I've even met anybody from Palestine. But as I say, we naturally, as a country, empathize with the underdog, wherever that is. So in any part of the world, it's not as if we have a particular relationship with, because most Irish people have never been to Palestine, but we do empathize with people who are being bullied, because we understand that here.
Have there been large demonstrations of people in the streets, like there have been across the United States, across Europe, in Asia? Millions and millions of people have been coming out in support of the Palestinians and against the Israeli genocide on these people who are unarmed.
Yes, yeah. No, it's totally against everything that Irish people innately stand for. And yes, there have been big protests here. And the protests here are, in relation to Palestine, interestingly enough, are the only protests that the mainstream media, the Irish state-affiliated media, are willing to show on their platforms. They don't show any other protests in relation to anything else that the administration is doing or not doing. But that's the only thing they do platform. So, as I say, I've, in my opinion, the Irish people are in an abusive relationship with the Irish administration. So I just find it interesting that such an abusive and viscerally totalitarian regime should suddenly start virtue signaling. And I'm not saying that it's not a warranted and merited and praiseworthy, of course it is, but these are the most venal administration in Ireland in the history of the Irish state. So that's how I feel about it.
Okay. So on the one hand, your administration is in favor of Palestinian statehood, which goes against the empire.
Yes,
certainly goes against the wishes of the United States, who have been really ambivalent about it. And the rest of the European Union have been, if not silent, in favor of the Israeli myth of the right of self-defense. Now, I have to ask you this. Does the Irish government have a position on the conflict in Ukraine between Russia and really the United States? I do not believe this is a proxy war at all because of
that's a good question, because the same government who are, as I said, flag waving about Palestine are vehemently anti-Russian and without any examination into anything, they're quite happy just to Russia bad from the get-go, to total denial of Russian culture, Russian, all diplomacy was thrown out the window, and they just followed whatever herd was sounding the anti-Russian bugle. I don't believe this Irish administration have any executive power whatsoever to do anything, including signal about Palestine. So that's my opinion. I think they're deeply compromised and deeply corrupt.
Let me ask you this. The Irish administration are Russophobic. What about the Irish people? Do they have this fear and hatred of Russia and all things Russian? Do they want to?
Not at all. It all depends on how much their exposure to Irish mainstream media and how much they actually believe it. There is a sizable majority of people who no longer trust the Irish mainstream media, which is a problem for the Irish establishment at the moment. So there is Irish people. We're an island nation, so I think that's one of the reasons why we are being so targeted by global propaganda, because we're an island nation. So they're sort of shooting fish in a barrel. So most Irish people we can be easily have our heads swayed. We had a very heavy-handed Catholic Church here in Ireland for a long time, and there was a naive folk Catholicism that followed that blindly. Now, then what we have now is this rabid secularism in Ireland, which is has not been a solution for anything, and has been even worse than the so-called the tyranny we lived under with the Catholic Church. This corporate secularism, this atheistic, narcissistic narrative that's very much in existence now at the moment. We are kicking back against it. We have seen it for what it is. But because we're an island nation, it's very easy to turn people's heads in relation to something like Russophobia. So it depends on how much of a victim, how much of a casualty of asymmetric fifth-generation warfare you are, which is essentially a victim of information war. If you believe what's coming out of the BBC and Radio Television Éireann, which is the Irish state-affiliated media platform, if you believe that, well, then you're going to think that everything Russian is bad. But if that little glass snow globe is shattered, well, then your mind is elsewhere. And there is a significant percentage of Irish people who no longer believe media. The media had an absolute abusive stranglehold on the Irish people for a long, long time here.
Wow. Same thing in the United States, same thing across the rest of the European Union, without a doubt. All of the media is owned and paid for by a very small group of powerful economic globalists. Let me ask you this. Do you know if the Irish government has sent money or weapons to Ukraine?
I don't know. I can't speak with any authority about that. I don't have access to that. Certainly, they haven't come out and made any official statement about that. But apparently they're sending microchips, whatever that means. So.
I wonder how aware the Irish people are of how dangerous the situation is now.
Yeah.
Not only because of what the United States continues to do, and this is not the EU and NATO. They are merely vassals of the United States government, whoever is in control.
Yes.
But they have been continuously escalating this aggression against Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And Russia has recently confirmed, including President Putin, the military of defense, that if Russian sovereignty, if the Russian nation is in danger, that Russia will resort to nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. And just last week, Russia and Belarus, its close ally, have initiated strategic nuclear weapons drills within Russia. Mm-hmm. Now, for many of us, including me, I am more worried now than I was during the Cuban Missile Crisis, which I was in high school, and I very well remember the fear that everybody had in America and around the world. But it seems like not many people are feeling this imminent existential threat of a nuclear Armageddon. What are your thoughts?
Well, again, that's because the media has drip fed people with a narrative that comfort is a very dangerous thing. Regis. Marcus Aurelius said, "Comfort is the most lethal addiction," and I think people in Ireland are quite comfortable. There's no major problem, and the pandemic, as far as everyone's concerned, is over. Businesses back to we're full employment, so people are quite comfortable. So they don't perceive the threat. When you're comfortable, you don't perceive the threat in the same way you should. And that's what Marcus Aurelius was talking about. You don't, for instance, if you're in a small town and you stand outside and look outside and you can see a town 4 miles away going up in smoke. If you're inoculated with comfort and you've been convinced that everything's going to be fine, you won't perceive that as a threat. So I think Irish people I think people in the West, but I can certainly speak with authority about Ireland, people are quite comfortable here. They don't perceive a threat because there is no inherent threat given to them from the state-affiliated media. But I mean, having said that, more and more people, but depending on what age demographic you're talking about or socio-economic demographic, are aware in Ireland that there certainly is a big threat. And we've had, I'm going to harp again, this Irish administration, they were happy to make anti-Russian comments just to get Twitter likes. That's how venal and how immature these people are. They're not actually fit for purpose. I don't think they ever had a job. They went straight from whatever university they went to into some career politics, and they never had a job. They had no life experience. They never had to deal with a situation that is because they always felt that there was somebody else was going to tell them what to do. So they don't understand threat, and so that's been passed down through the civil service and all the other apparatchiks, which is the great Soviet word that I think we need to come up with a word for that in the Gaelic language, apparatchik, because this country sadly is full of them as well, and they are the people who administrate the death by 1,000 cuts. So that's what's happening here too as well.
Well, this is the same thing in America. The United States politicians at the federal level, including the state level, are apparatchiks. They have no life experience. They have no experience with diplomacy.
Yes.
And that is painfully obvious right now. And when I look at these neoliberal governments, and they are governments across the European Union, from the UK all the way to the Baltics, these people, I mean, where did they come from? I know many were educated in Ivy League colleges in America. They were groomed by the FBI, by the State Department, to return to their countries. And because of United States soft power, money, and influence, these people were placed in a position to rise to where they are today, in position of incredible power.
Yes.
And you can look all across the European Union. When they speak, they all speak from the same talking points. They
don't have two original thoughts to rub together, most of them, apart from very few.
And they have no idea of diplomacy. They're looking at a conflict in their neighborhood in Ukraine that has a real possibility, because of their actions, of spilling over into a real direct war between NATO, the EU, and Russia. They are forcing this. And I hate to think what is going to happen if and when Russia is forced to respond, because it won't be with 1 million soldiers and tanks. It will be with nuclear weapons. And that is, for me, the unthinkable. Matthew, do do you have any hope there's any way out of this? Now, when I say this, when we're looking at what we're talking about tonight, it's not just what's happening in Palestine, Israeli genocide, how the Arab nations now have finally come out against Israel and in support of Palestine. And when we look to the east, we see that the United States is sending weapons and money to Taiwan, which is a direct threat to China. And China is responding now this past week with massive military drills in the straits between Taiwan and China. Now we can forget about all the other minor skirmishes that are going on in the world, but just these three flashpoints really, in my opinion, and I'd like your opinion, have the world in the most dangerous position and humanity in the most dangerous position it's ever been before in human history. Your thoughts?
Yes, well, I mean, they have the mechanism to destroy the world now, whereas before, if you had venal, corrupt, or vicious tyrants, they could only do so much damage because they had to go on forced marches and there was the weather to contend with. Now this can be done in the blink of an eye. And on top of that, you have, as I said, people who have no life experience, they're almost playing house. They think this is almost like a video game where they get extra bonus points if they can virtue signal or something, and they haven't worked out that there is a clear and present danger, and that the outcome. This is the outcome of. This is what happens when you put mediocre people in positions of authority, in whether it's in government or anything. If you're running a sweet shop and you have someone behind the counter who doesn't like people or has bad social skills, the sweet shop is destined to failure. And we're dealing with the same thing at the macro level here with countries. But as I said, I can only speak about Ireland, and I think Ireland is at some level in symbolic relation with the West. I think we always have been. I think we are the imaginative heart of the West, and the West has always looked to Ireland for our sense of humor and our sense of the spiritual, and that's why I think Ireland is really under attack at the moment. But again, when you speak about the danger is, and what hope have we? I think the hope is going to come from people. I think people are wising up, and the sheer gulf between what administrations in control or regimes in control of countries are saying and actually what people want has never been so big. If you're talking about war, people need to buy into war, whether it's in any situation, and there's no buy-in, certainly in Ireland, for any war with Russia amongst Irish people. And I believe the same is in the UK. And they've tried hard to jig up a war in the UK, and they're not biting. So you need to get buy-in, and that's the biggest positive out of this, is that the propaganda is not working the way it used to. So that's I think is going to be our savior.
Well, I agree with you, and I hope so. I wonder what your thoughts are on these globalists who, for me, are obviously in charge of what's going on all around the world. And because they now seem to be losing the media and propaganda that they've been used to for so long.
Yes.
They're even more threatened, and therefore the escalations and the threats and the aggression that we see escalating in Ukraine, across Europe, in Israel, in Palestine, and even Taiwan, to me indicates they're really threatened and feeling like they're losing their power. What are your thoughts on that before we finish?
Well, I like to bring down the macro, the bigger picture into a micro. So if you think of the globalists as an abusive spouse, and you think of them from that, so abusive spouse, they try the punching and various gaslighting and denial of money, all this type of stuff. And then when that doesn't work, they said we have to go and renew our vows, and we're going to go on a cruise. That's the other thing they try, and then and that's usually just before they abandon their partner and leave them. Finally, is they do some bizarre thing like this. The globalists are behaving with a psychopathic mindset. Now, anybody who's ever unfortunately have had any encounter with psychopathy or a psychopath, the same mechanism is used by globalists as the abusive spouse. And firstly, resistance is futile. There's no point in sure who else was going to have you if I don't if you don't stay with me, this is the abusive spouse. You put up with what I'm offering, sure, no one else would have you. And that's so it's ritual humiliation, and a lot of what the globalists seem to be doing, and certainly, and I can only speak from what I see before my eyes in Ireland. In Ireland, we have this hysterical woke ideology, which initially I thought was just pathetic. Then I see the malevolence under it, because there's also tied to this gender ideology and the deconstruction of children, and questioning whether children are born in the correct body, this sort of stuff. Now, and things like you can't even object to this, and we can take your children and we can send them off to have their gender altered. We can make you eat bugs. We can deny your food supply. We can tell you what to think. We can make you stand 2 meters away, and we can make you put a mask on in a restaurant when you're going to the toilet, but you can take your mask on when you're sitting down. All of these are humiliating mechanisms, and I think the function of this is coming to my point with the globalists. A lot of what they're doing is to humiliate nation states and to get them to accept really unreasonable things. And the purpose of the humiliation is, if we can make, for instance, Ireland. I don't know if you saw that we had a Eurovision Song Competition recently, and this is in the island of the saints and scholars. There was a song entered, and I'm a musician. It wasn't a song. It was a very well polished piece of multimedia installation, but it was essentially a satanic, a hyper-sexualized ritual celebrating witchcraft, and so this was this is part of the ritual humiliation that the globalists are doing. So therefore, we can do this to you. You can't object to it because you're worthless, and no one else is going to have you. So you have to stick with us, and we're going to give you a digital ID now, because you don't even know who you are, because we've taken your culture away from you. We've taken your spiritual identity away from you. So now we just have to barcode you. So it's absolute Gaslight, which is a great movie. Anyone who wants to understand globalists, how they work, just watch that movie Gaslight. It's the same thing at the domestic level.
Wow, Matthew, I agree with you 100%. They are, on the one hand, humiliating us, conditioning us to obey. They have all of these sovereign countries, most of them under their power.
Yeah.
Maybe with the exception of Russia and China and a few others.
Yes.
And you talk about this wokeism. You talk about this neoliberal belief system. Now, I didn't see and don't watch television, so I didn't see Eurovision. But all I saw were
Good for
these.
you.
Yeah. All I saw were these photographs and brief video clips of what I thought was satanic rituals. And here people apparently are eating it up, or they're at least tolerating it. And you know, one thing that I'm really happy about is that for all of maybe Russia's faults or weaknesses, the people by and large here have rejected all of it. All of it.
Well, that's great, and that's a great testament to the Russians actually. And it's a very. Having said that about Ireland, there's a huge percentage of people don't want it here, because I'm talking about that referendum recently. They wanted to erase the word woman in the Irish Constitution and to remove the idea of relationship as being marriage based upon a man and woman. And they wanted a term durable relationships. And they wanted Irish people to sign up for this and to erase the word woman from the Irish Constitution. Now, it was rejected, the biggest rejection in the history of the Irish state. The Irish people rejected this, 80% practically, Irish people rejected this. So this, you know, there's the tea leaves. If you're a globalist, you're reading the tea leaves, it's not working. The programming is not working anymore because Irish people, they threw down hard with the pandemic, and they really scared the living daylights out of people here. Largely, I think, because it was an island nation. We got the longest and the hardest lockdown in the West happened in Ireland. As I said, we're getting in the neck here. Now, they have run out of road, I believe, with the Irish people. So their next bet now is to start virtue signaling about Palestine. And that's what I see it now. And that's, maybe I'm being cynical, but that's what I see.
Yeah. Mathew, it's really great to see you again. I really appreciate your insights. I really hope that the Irish people, with their long history and culture of family, even religious beliefs, and their deep values, which I believe are conservative, they're not liberal.
No.
I really do hope that they succeed in throwing off the yoke of the administration that is now governing your country. But I have to thank you for this insight. I don't think a lot of people know what's happening in Ireland. And I think most people don't know how the Irish people feel about the things we've been talking about. So thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. We'll look forward to keeping in touch.
Thank you for having me on. Yeah.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.